according to Matthew, the 6th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said to the disciples, "Beware of practicing your piety before others in order to be seen by them, for then you have no reward from your Father in heaven. So whenever you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be praised by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be done in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And whenever you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, so that they may be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But whenever you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And whenever you fast, do not look dismal like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces so as to show others that they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that your fasting may be seen not by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You may be seated. So what if this evening you turned to your neighbor and you showed each other a list of where you have spent your treasure, your money, over the last month or so? Now, don't worry, I'm not going to make you do that. But think about it for a moment. If you had your bank statement here, perhaps, or your credit card statement, or a check register, how you spend your treasure is really an open book for others to see what you are like as a person. Your spending patterns say something about you. And those spending patterns also say something about your own heart. That is, after all, what Jesus is talking about in that last verse of our gospel reading for this evening, when he said, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." I think there's a lot of truth in that statement. How we spend our money says a lot about what's important to us. Every day, we are making choices about what to buy or what not to buy. Every day, we make decisions about what it is that we need or what it is that we might want. And all of these decisions and choices reflect our values and our priorities. It's really common sense if you stop and think about it. We make choices about how much of our income we want to spend on housing, or how often we might like to eat out. Do we want to save up for travel, or would we rather use our money and buy a large screen TV? How many activities are we going to pay for our children? Are we going to buy that book, or are we going to wait for it to come from the library? The list goes on, and every decision tells us something about ourselves, and if we indeed were an open book, it would tell others about ourselves as well. They would learn what is and isn't important to us. By the way, this isn't like good news or bad news in any way. It really just is, right? It's the way in which we live. It's the way in which all of us use what we have. But there's also another way that we can look at this verse, and that is that where our heart is, there we will also find our treasure. So if it's true that wherever we put our treasure, that's where we're going to find our heart, it's also true that we can guide our hearts to do different things, to transform us, to teach us to love in different ways by putting our treasure there first. In other words, we can also decide first what we want to have be important to us, and then if we put our treasure there, our hearts are going to follow. Another way of saying it is that it isn't just how we spend our money that reveals what kind of people we are. In addition, how we spend our money can determine what kind of people we want to become. how we spend our treasure will determine what kind of people we will become, where our hearts are going to go. And remember this as well, our treasure isn't just about our money. Treasure can also be how we spend our time. It can be about the things that we already own. Treasure can include our family. Treasure can even include our own physical bodies. Whatever we value, that's our treasure. And when we decide what it is that we want to treasure in our lives, well, then we can train our hearts to go in that direction as well. We can decide where our time and our talents and our treasure will go, and every time we do that, our heart will follow us. We are entering this Lenten season now, and when we do that, there are often three, I'm just going to call them buzzwords, that you hear during the Lenten season. These words are often used to define our actions in this season, or we can think of them as three different kinds of spiritual disciplines that we are encouraged to take up. Those three words or three disciplines are fast, give, and pray. And in every case, by deciding what we will or maybe won't do in each of those regards, we are training our hearts to follow. So the first one that we can think about in Lent is fast. And to fast is to really turn our attention inward for a time, to consider how it is we're going to care for ourselves, how we care for our own bodies, our own beings. Do we value the life that we have been given? Or better yet, do we want to value the life that we've been given? If we say yes to that, then what we might do, what treasure might we put to use in that regard in order to train our hearts to love ourselves more? It might be that we do indeed want to embark on a time of regular fasting during the Lenten season. Maybe we want to skip a meal once a week, or even take a day. But maybe it's not food we want to fast from. Maybe there are other things. Perhaps we decide that it's alcohol we want to fast from during the Lenten season. Or maybe it's too much time in front of the screen. Maybe we realize that there's something that we would rather take on instead, or take up, like exercise, or a new hobby, or intentional Sabbath time every week. What kind of person do you want to become? And where do you want to put your treasure in order for that to happen? The next spiritual discipline is giving. And charitable giving always calls us back to creation, to care for one another and the world that God has made. So what's important to us? What's a need that we know is in our community or in our world, and it's a need that we want to feel passionate about? Or what's a place, or where is a place where we want to know that we can make a difference, where we can help? Once we ask and answer that question, then it's really very simple, because there are so many places where our dollars can be put to very, very good use. And there are also so many places where our gifts of time and talent can also be put to very good use. What kind of person do you want to become? And where must you put your treasure in order to do that? And then the last spiritual discipline is prayer. Prayer quiets the nonstop monologue that goes on in our mind day and night sometimes. And prayer helps us to make space in order to hear God stirring in us. Making time and space for prayer gives us opportunity to consider what we want those hearts that belong to us to do, and where we want them to go. Making time for prayer helps us reorder our priorities. It keeps us on the path that God has given us. During this Lenten season, all of us are going to have an opportunity every week to spend time on this particular practice. During our midweek session that starts next Wednesday, and in the Wednesdays that follow, Pastor Janet is going to be leading us each week on a short teaching of a different kind of prayer practice to use. And then that will be followed every week by an opportunity for us to try on that practice. And then on many of those weeks as well, if you're interested, you can also come and join the middle school students, because we're going to spend a little bit more time doing some of those prayer activities after worship each week. Fast, give, pray. For as the New Century Version of the Bible says about this verse, your heart will be where your treasure is. Or you can also remember the encouragement that the Passion Translation might give to this verse. That one reads, for your heart will always pursue what you value as your treasure. This Lenten season, decide where do you want your heart to be, and then put your treasure there. Amen.